everybody. Welcome to the maiden broadcast of Values Factor. This is KLIATCHKO. If you had been a keen observer of the news for the last several years now, you might have arrived at the same conclusion I have, and that is we actually hardly have news. What you see in mainstream media nowadays is nothing more but opinionated, biased, slanted commentary of current events. That is not news. News commentary has become sorely lacking in one very important aspect of what all news should have. And what is that? Objectivity. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't mean to say that there is no room for commentary in news. But you see, when you talk about news, the first thing that comes to mind is objective reporting of facts of what happened during the course of a day. But if you watch and listen to the way the so-called news nowadays is formatted, after saying a few things about what happened, it's closely followed up with plenty of commentary about the news. And anchors will be calling upon guests to immediately comment and give their perspectives about the goings on in the world around us. While that may have lent some, nice trimmings and new things to the way news is reported, because immediately people are allowed to chime in and give their opinions about the news. You see, there is a problem with that way and that manner of reporting, because right there and then, the news loses its objectivity. And rather, the gatekeepers of these news can immediately shape public opinion just by bringing in other people, guests, panelists, who immediately comment on the content of the news. Of course, it may help people have a better understanding and grasp of current events. But really, to me, that is a very, very dangerous trend. Because what that does, and what is really the intent, okay? If you keenly observe what's going on in the way the news is covered, what really goes on is that the people they invite to comment about the news are very well selected and vetted to more or less give a very biased opinion that tend to gravitate towards the leanings of the news outlet itself and the agenda that they want to perpetuate. Now, that is not news. That is not news at all. You see, let me give you a little background about myself in order to perhaps for you to appreciate where I'm coming from. I have spent a good many years, in my calculation, it could be anywhere from 25 to 28 years of my own professional life, entrenched in multimedia. I first started my career in media as a police beat reporter back in Manila, covering, of all places, the city jails. And I would cover crime news, right? I was then a student. I was still a student of journalism at the University of the Philippines, and I was apprenticing already as a cub reporter in the police beat. And boy, was it quite an initiation into journalism. So much so that I almost hated journalism after that. But anyway, I went on to still be involved. I was involved with radio, television production, and even film. Okay. I even hosted my own radio show in a local AM station in Manila, which won an Anvil Award, one of the most coveted awards in media back then. I also later on published my own newspapers. Yes, I became a publisher of a local newspaper in the city of Caloocan in Manila. When I went to Iloilo, I was as a columnist. I wrote weekly columns in one of the most popular newspapers there. I also was appointed by the President of the Philippines, Fidel Ramos, to be a director of the movie and Television Review and Classification Board. We were in charge of screening TV shows and movies and rating them and things like that. So I have been around all forms of media for a good number of years of my career, and I was dabbling between media, the academe, and my own businesses that I was doing almost simultaneously during those years. So, I had very well been entrenched in media, and I had been in the practice of media, and that's why I could tell, in all simplicity, in all humility, that what we are dealt with now, what we're getting now in media, is a far cry from what I have learned in journalism school and what I myself had practiced in my own career. And I haven't quite quit media up to now. I'm very much involved in social media and other forms of media. I publish books. I'm involved with the publishing business. I'm in the printing business, and I've been doing plenty of marketing these days, not only of my own CBD products, but helping other people with their own marketing. I was one of the first ones also to do Google SEO optimization kind of marketing for local companies. So I have been, and I am, even in new media nowadays. Okay, so I'm very much involved with media, and therefore, in all humility, I could tell that things are not the same anymore, and things have practically deteriorated into something that is far from what you might call real journalism. So, why? Maybe you might ask, why have we gotten to this point, right? Where have things gone wrong in the course of just 25, 30 years from the time when I was involved in media and what we are realizing now? Well, the way I analyze it is that not only media, but many other things in our society, beginning from the school system, believe it or not, has fallen into the very, very grave and dangerous error of relativism. Relativism is all around us, in schools, in media, sadly, even in church organizations. Everywhere around us, people seem to have forgotten the value of truth. That nowadays, everything seems to be relative. Everything, truth depends on what you want to make it to be. And that's sad, and that is false. That is not true. Not true. There is such a thing as objective truth, and it should not only be understood, but it has to be presented and taught the way truth should be presented and taught to people. People have to be trained to think critically and to try to discern what is true and factual beneath the surface of the news or anything else that any other information that they deal with. And sadly, that is what is sorely lacking in today's society, in today's crop of people, of students, of millennials. Truth, the understanding of truth, seems to be not a very common skill nowadays. The understanding of truth. Sadly, media has played a very central role in the relativism of truth. Just look at the way they present the so-called news to you nowadays. Okay? Everything is relativized. There's no such thing anymore as objective truth, even in media, even in what should be the most objective thing of all, the news. Okay? And when there's no objective truth, people lose the ability to make rational and well-considered decisions just because they don't know who to believe, and what to trust anymore. And when there's no objective truth anymore, people lose the ability to make rational and well-considered decisions just because they don't know who to believe anymore. They don't know who to trust anymore. And because they don't know how to think anymore. You See, when you lose the ability to discern truth, you lose the ability to think, because there's not going to be any logic in your processing of information anymore, because you don't know the truth. And media has a lot to account for as far as causing this kind of phenomenon in people nowadays. All that people know for certain nowadays is how to be entertained and how to procure entertainment. And yeah, most of media nowadays is a clown show, right? It's a circus. Well, actually, media and politics combined, okay? Plenty of circus. Well, because that's all they know how to do now. Entertain people and not tell the truth. You see, there's a reason why back in the old days, media used to be called the fourth estate. The fourth estate. The fourth independent entity. Independent from the usual political triumvirate of the executive, the legislative, and the judicial system of government. Right? While media is not government, media has always played the role of the fourth leg that really helped stabilize the not government in itself, but the way people would interact with government and the way that people asserted their rights vis-a-vis government. It was a way to balance the situation for everybody all the way around. Okay? And the media used to play a very, very important role. But nowadays, with media seemingly or obviously getting co-opted by many political considerations and organizations, well, they have lost their credibility in many more ways than one. And that is a sad fact. So now we have lost that fourth estate, so-called, that could have provided us with an unbiased understanding of the goings-on in society and could help us understand the truth behind current events. So having said all of that, what is values factor all about? Well, having realized all of the above that we had just described about media, I created Values Factor as a forum where people can examine the values involved in current events. Now you might ask, why values? Because really, come to think about it, nothing happens in the world around us that is values indifferent. Everything that anyone thinks, does, or says have a basis on values or the lack of it, right? Anything that a politician thinks, says, or does, anything that anybody who has anything to say in society, anybody who has a project to do, anybody who has an idea to disseminate out there, any member of society that has something to contribute, everything is laden with values, or, as I said, the lack of it. Why is that important? Because truth to be told is that if everything involves values, then for us to have a good appreciation, a good understanding, and in fact a good utility of the news, well, we have to try to discern and understand the values behind current events. And we have to have a good grasp of what these values are that are being communicated to us, that are being implied within the news, and the consequences these might have on our personal lives. You see, I believe that beyond the news, beyond the facts, beyond the reality that we encounter every day in the news, the more important part of all of that information is not so much the information we get from it, but rather the implications that those pieces of news have for our lives. And believe it or not, most of the time, if not all of the time, the implications in our lives have to do with values. They have to do with the very core reality of our existence that are all enveloped by values. As I said, everything we think, say, and do are all about values. And if we do not grow in the understanding and appreciation of the values behind and within the news, then the news not only does not make sense for us and will not make sense for us, but worse, we will not know how to use the news that we consume every day. And if we don't know how to use the news, we wouldn't know how to use the information that we get from the news because we don't understand the values implications therein. Then what happens to us? We become victims, not only of the influence of others, but far worse, the manipulation of others, using the news as an avenue to harm us in many more ways than we can imagine. I'll just give you one very concrete example, in case you haven't realized yet. Look at what happened to COVID. Okay? Look at what's happening to us as human beings under the pretext of a pandemic like COVID. We have become a people of fear. We're no longer the freest people of the world, as we are proud to say and proclaim to the rest of the world. Right? And by the way, we're not the only ones. The rest of the world have been subjected to this ridiculous fear of a virus for which 99 point something % of people have survived. We will tackle this matter of COVID at another Values Factor episode, maybe more extensively, but I'm just giving that out there as a very clear example of how we have been victims, not so much of the misinformation in the news, okay? Not so much that, there's plenty of that, but really the more dangerous part of the misinformation is how it has affected us as a people, and how it has destroyed our most cherished values as people. Not even as a nation anymore, but as people. And that is why, to me, the more important aspect of the news would be the understanding of the values inherent therein and the implications there are for all of us consumers of news. So here at Values Factor, I hope to be able to examine those values within the news, right? Inherent in the events themselves that get reported, at least those that get reported for our consumption. And I believe that only by having a good understanding of these values in and about the news, that we as consumers of news can make sense of the events that happen around us, and thereby make sound decisions of how we shall use, react, deal with current events as they affect our lives. We need to get involved in current events, not merely as spectators of news, but as good critics and as good users of the information that we get out of the news. And the best way I think we can get involved is if we understand and appreciate the values incorporated, involved, and encrypted in today's news. Now, some of you have been asking me, where do I get the news? Okay, well, definitely not from CNN, not from MSNBC, CBS, and not even from Fox News all the time, no. Well, let's put it this way. As a journalist, I have been trained to get information from everywhere. So yes, I do go and visit these sites occasionally. But I have also learned to go to some other outlets that I trust better, only because I think they have a better track record of being objective in the reporting of the news. They are less politicized, and although there might still be a tinge of bias there, but I think the treatment of news and current events in the other smaller outlets are more reliable. And also because they have more reason to stay objective, because precisely they are fighting all the bias that is now present in big media. So yes, I go to smaller outlets. They report the same things. Yeah, they report the same things, but hey, they're more objective. They're more they stick better to just the objective reality of what happened, and that's it. Very little commentary and opinionated people. Okay, so and then I pick the news. Okay, what we're going to be discussing here mostly in Values Factor would be news that really affect us, and by way of values. Okay, by way of the values that are implicated in those news, and how we could really understand them so we can make use of the information better. Now, of course, there are plenty of things that are happening around us. Every minute of the day, something gets reported. There's so many things that happen around us. Every minute of the day, there's always something going on. Now, but then not everything is worthy of being commented upon on Values Factor. So we are going to pick and choose the kinds of news that would really have an impact on our humanity, basically. Okay, so we're going to be picking news that impact our lives as citizens, both of our country, America, but also as citizens of our global community of people. We're going to try and pick and understand news that will help us foster our humanity. Not only our Americanism, but our humanity. What is really going to be relevant to us and important to us as human beings. What is going to help us develop as better human beings in this world. We will examine news not so much from their patriotistic perspective, but more importantly, from the perspective of our nature as human beings and as children of one and the same Creator and God. Oops, did I just mention God? Yes, I did. You heard me right. And yes, the perspective that you'll be hearing from me is basically Christian. But let me already warn you, some of you who might be skeptical and say, oh, well, so isn't that being biased? Isn't that, isn't that a presentation or an understanding of news from a biased perspective, the Christian view? Well, let me tell you, that's far from being biased. The Christian worldview is the most objective worldview you can ever base values on. The Christian worldview is consistent with the most comprehensive, sophisticated, integrated, studied, and documented matrix of principles that present values in the most holistic and complete form. And all, if not most philosophers, moralists, ethicists, and scholars worth their weight in gold can attest to that. I'm not inventing anything. This is not going to be just my perspective. We are going to be borrowing heavily from the perspective of many other people who have seen things under the same light, under the same Christian perspective of humanity and the world. And so that's what we're using here. And I would like to openly bring it out there and invite you to join me in this exercise, in this forum, and let's go through this journey together. Okay? Let's go through this journey together, because I think it is only by having a forum like this that will help us to understand and have a better grasp of the values behind the news that we as a people, as a nation, can grow and develop and unite and do things for the common good together, better, stronger. All of the division that we have been experiencing nowadays, not only locally in our own country, but globally, I'd like to think, is a product of having lost the most basic of values, which is the truth and the understanding of the truth. And tied up to all of that will be all the other values that have been relativized by a very, very liberal perspective of the world that has been fed to us by the educational system, by the media, and yes, even some religious sects around. So, my humble attempt to try to, realign these things and try to understand the world again from the perspective of values is my way of contributing to the betterment of my community and the world around me. But I am one man. I will try to do what I can. But perhaps if you're going to join me and participate actively in this forum and in the exchanges that we're going to have here, then maybe together we can make the world a brighter place, a better place, a more peaceful place, a more united place, where you and I and our children can have harmony, can have love, can have a better future. Join me by liking this page, Values Factor, and please like that page, follow it, so that whenever there's an update like this, you can get notification about it, and let's discuss over there about values and current events. So I hope to see you in what might become a weekly kind of forum. Maybe it's just depending on the amount of news we can that happens in a week, and we can comment on them. I might be able to even do things midweek, just depending on the amount of research that comes into play there. But hopefully we can do this on a weekly basis, if not even twice or three times a week, just depending on the volume of material that we can cover or the urgency with which these pieces of news surface around us. So please join me. Please join me. I hope to see you again in this forum, Values Factor. Thanks you very much for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.